So in Paladins, SKYE, the name of one of the champions, is kind of one of the biggest ironies, because SKYE never goes into the sky, because SKYE has no movement ability to go up vertically. Almost all of the other flanking champions, apart from Lex, which arguably is kind of a damage dealer anyway, has an ability that lets them go upwards. And for a very long time, the serious SKYE players really wanted something for SKYE to go upwards. And in the pro scene, she is not really picked up at all. But on the other hand, in casual games, and for new players at least, SKYE seems to be such a stomp factor. And people get annoyed at the way that she works and the way that she's invisible and she can come in, burst people down. And she's quite frustrating, I think, to play against for a lot of people coming into the game first off. And actually you'll see from my footage today that I am doing quite a lot in the game. And I think one of the things to mention is that with the new legendary card that allows you to reset all of your abilities when you get an elimination, which doesn't mean a kill, it could be an assist, it resets all your abilities. And this allows SKYE to snowball if you are doing well and your team is already doing well. And it means that you can keep going invisible, keep putting down your smokes, keep using your right click, which is extra damage. And I think that SKYE snowball can have some psychological effects on the enemies, as this SKYE coming at them just seems to be invincible and using all their abilities all the time. So there's a pretty stark contrast between the newer player games, casual games, and sort of the pro scene and the higher level games. In my opinion, SKYE has a very low skill floor, so where people can start using SKYE, but has also a very low skill ceiling. One big elephant in the room currently is that Lex, a champion that can place a bounty on an enemy, which basically marks them on the map forever, wherever you are once you get close enough to them. And versus a SKYE, it practically counters her invisibility, and that is pretty much what SKYE's about. So if you go up against a Lex, GG. And in casual games you can't predict it and your enemy doesn't know what you're picking, so it's basically rolling a dice. But in comp games, if you pick a SKYE, or were to pick a SKYE early, then it'd likely be countered with a Lex to just basically take out one of your champions. Whilst Lex was nerfed, it is harder to duel as a Lex. You still are a very squishy champion as SKYE, and even that first shot being able to get off without you being able to see the Lex coming or know where they're coming from whilst they can see you entirely the whole time is such a massive advantage that it makes it almost possible to go against. Anyway, today I'm going to be talking about SKYE and OB48, the newest patch, the buffs she's received, and whether or not she is making it or creeping back into the meta, or if she's actually any good at the moment. So the first buff to SKYE was the improvement of her time bomb. Her time bomb is her ultimate, and it used to be that you'd have to run up to the enemies and literally just drop it down at your feet, then run away again or fight in the middle of that. And it often got you killed, or got you killed trying to get into a group of enemies. But now, you can throw, sort of lob the bomb, not massively far, but it's got quite a drop on it, but you can lob it from a distance. Now that doesn't sound like a lot, but A, because the way invisibility works, when you get close to enemies you're spotted, it means that you don't have to get close enough to be spotted out of invisibility, so you're not likely to die before you can plant it. It means that you don't have to run away from the enemies as you're in the middle of them, and you can fire from the outside of the blast radius or fire it where they're going to try and run to. And C, you can throw it in prediction of where the enemies might move or go that you can't normally reach. So you might fire it at an exit or an archway or something at the back, because you know the enemies are going to try and run that way to get away from it, and if they run forwards they might run into your allies. In general, it just makes the ultimate a bit more tactical and also easier for you to use as that SKYE. Next up, Hidden, your ability that makes you go invisible, has had its duration increased by 4 seconds, which is a flat buff. However, basically what's happened is they've taken the card called Cloak and made it so that the level 2 of that cloak before was the 4 seconds increase. But now the levels are only plus 1 second every time, whereas it was 2 every time before. And if you did run cloak before, if you got level 4 of cloak before, it was 8 seconds. But if you get cloak 4 of the new card, it's also 8 seconds with that duration increase of 4 seconds. However, it means you can get rid of the cloak card if you were using the 2 or so card in your build and run a different card instead that gives you other benefits. Now these two buffs are nice, and I think they do improve some of the utility of SKYE and are generally nice little nudges, but I don't think they address the core issues that this champion has trying to fit into the current meta. And unlike other champions, if you use her to the best of ability, she can only get so far. Some examples of this are, firstly, her left click, her weapon. So her left click is almost like a submachine gun. It's meant to be a wrist crossbow, it's meant to fire crossbow bolts off, but it acts, for all intents and purposes, like a submachine gun. Now this submachine gun doesn't have any recoil, so there's nothing for you to control in the way it kicks upwards, like the Victor or the Tyra has recoil that you can control and get the damage focused, and it takes a little bit of skill to try and do that. And also, bursting the weapon is quite difficult to any good effect. So the way the weapon works is it has a bloom of fire, and the fire bloom is based on a chance, and the chance is informed by every shot you take with the crossbow up to 10 shots, and is up to a maximum of 10% less accurate. What this actually means is that a few of your shots will go a little bit out of the fire pattern towards the end of your burst. But the difference between holding down and just spamming your left click and trying to burst it is not a lot. And the only real way to seem to burst it correctly and get all your shots is to burst for like 3 or 4 shots, then wait, and then do the same thing again, and it resets the accuracy, it seems. Or to single fire shot each of your shots at an enemy, and that resets it each time, and you can get headshots straight away. I was testing it in the shooting range, but honestly, when you're moving around, that's almost impossible to do, and isn't actually that useful, and generally it just seems that if you hold down your left click and spam it, and you'll get not too different results from trying to control the thing in the first place, and often you'll be close enough to an enemy because of the damage fall off on the weapon that you don't need to do a lot of bursting anyway. What my point is really is that there's not a lot of difference between the best user of this weapon and the worst user of this weapon. Most of the aiming is moving and keeping your crosshair on an enemy, and little to do with bursting or any true sort of aim like you might get in Androxus or somebody else. Next up we have her hidden, her main movement ability, and her stealth. And just starting off, before I talk about the actual mechanics itself, one of the big problems with not having a ability that lets you go upwards vertically, vertical movement, is that most of the flankers in the lineup need to get in the back lines behind enemies to take them by surprise and burst them down quite quickly. And usually the best way to do this is to go up onto high ground and go behind the enemies and take them by surprise. With Skye, you can't go up onto the high ground unless you run there, and often the way to get onto the high ground is behind. You have to go through enemy lines and go up a ramp that's in the pack lines and come back round on yourself, or you have to climb up something slowly to get onto, say, several blocks and get onto the top level of a walkway. And then this, with the fact that the way that stealth works in the game is that if you're close enough to an enemy, they can see your outline and they can see that you are invisible. It makes it very hard to actually go around and flank enemies, especially when there's only so many routes that you can take to go around and flank somebody. And if the enemy know there's a Skye on the enemy team, on their enemy team, then they'll be watching those routes very carefully and will have some idea of where you're going to come from every time. Next is the fact that although you can get movement speed with the ninja card to make the hidden faster, actually a lot of the other champions have a movement ability that can chase you down better. So if you go invisible and you're trying to run away, you're using it as an escape ability, they can just use their movement ability and catch up with you and kill you. Or if you get somebody very low, an enemy champion, and they want to get away, they can use their movement ability and start running. Now, your weapon has range and can kill people, but the drop-off often means that if somebody tries to do a full-on runner, they're probably going to get away and you're not going to be able to catch up with them. Another thing about Skye is that the hidden is actually on quite a long cooldown. Now, unless you have the legendary card which resets your abilities on eliminations, once you've killed somebody, because you want to use your hidden to go in and get the kill, because you want to get behind somebody, you want to attack people and burst them down as quickly as possible from an advantageous position as a Skye. What it means is that you'll often not have your hidden to run away again, even if you do get a kill, or if you don't get the kill and they run away, then you're left a bit in the open and very vulnerable whilst you wait for that cooldown. Next up is Skye's Smoke Bomb. This one also could be seen as partly an escape tool, and you can throw it in doorways and run away, and what it does is it obscures the enemy's vision past the smoke, so they can't see any of their enemies behind that, so your allies. And also you go invisible when you go into the smoke as well, so that can be used as an escape tool, but at the same time the enemies can run through it if they can fire into it, and generally it's not a great way to escape just by yourself. What smokescreen is good at is a great tool for your team to obscure your whole team, because they increase the size and the radius of the smoke bombs. And also, if you are on a roll and you use the card that resets on eliminations all of your abilities, you can put down 2 smokes and just basically cover quite a large area in smoke where the enemies can't see through. Now back to her ultimate, there's some big problems with her ultimate. So it used to be that the radius of the ultimate did maximum damage all the way across wherever you were in that explosion, and it was pretty much a one-hit kill on most champions in that radius. It reduced the radius, but at the same time, before the nerf, the time bomb wasn't actually that feared in higher level games. Why? Because A, you can just run behind the payload to hide from it because the payload blocks the explosion, and B, you just had to get into cover quick enough to get away from it. Something similar is happening right now. The detonation time gives people enough time to run away, and there's only one surefire way to get a kill, and that's with a Sarah's ultimate, dragging everybody back in again and killing them when they're dragged into the epicenter. I do think there could be some improvements on the time bomb, maybe in letting it pass through walls, so there's a damage fall off and there's the radius, so if you get out the radius you're still fine, but at the same time it doesn't mean that you can be cheesy and just hide behind a wall that's right next to the point. But then time bomb isn't necessarily the thing that needs to be changed, but that's just one thought on time bomb and how it isn't that effective at the moment. One part of the kit that Skye has that doesn't really have any complaints is the fact that her wrist bolts, her poison bolts, reduce healing by 50%, so you've got an inbuilt cauterize, which is great, and also does damage based on the maximum health of the enemy. And those 3 bolts will do 10% of the maximum health damage over 5 seconds, which means that on a champion with a bigger health pool, it is going to do more damage. But at the same time, if you get all 3, you're doing 30% of their health. With somebody with 3,000 health, that's a lot more than somebody with 1,800. And you can harass the tanks and the frontliners and help to take them down, but at the same time, it's easy to get caught out by the frontliners, especially a Makoa Hook dragging you in, a Torvald using their runic blast on you and stopping you from escaping, or a Fernando charging after you and just basically sticking on your ass and not letting you get away, going invisible. Unless they are focused on something else, the burst is difficult to take them down. I think in general a lot of people that play Skye want there to be some kind of movement ability. Whether it's like a wall grab, so like a double jump on a wall to get into higher cover, or like a double jump or a pounce, or like a sort of like jump into your smoke, so when you throw your smoke you jump with it. Something like that could be very useful, even if it's at the cost of making some of our other kit less useful. I think that Skye definitely needs some sort of chase or some sort of movement ability that is vertical, even if perhaps taking away the extra speed in the invisibility or something like that. I don't think they can improve her invisibility. I mean, the biggest problem with invisibility is that people can see you when you're close up, and they can see you when you're in your effective range for your weapon, basically. But if they made it so that you were never visible, like in a MOBA game, and unless they had the Illuminate or a ward or something, then it would be very frustrating because it's a shooter game, and being attacked from somewhere where they're completely invisible even until they're next to you would probably not go down well with a lot of players and would make Skye very frustrating to play against. So in my opinion, the movement needs to come somewhere else in her kit. That is what Skye is sorely lacking. Another problem with Skye is that her poke damage is pretty limited, in that other flank champions in the game have the ability to poke and do damage from a distance, and quite significant damage from a distance, whilst also being able to survive at those ranges. Whereas Skye, if you are trying to poke and you are visible, you've only got 1,800 health, it's very easy to get taken down pretty quickly, and you don't have a self-sustain, a heal like an Eevee going into an ice block or something like that. And the only way you're good really is going into those backlines of the enemies and taking them out one by one. And currently in the way that the comp scene works and the pro games, they don't really have that much flanking into the backlines, as much as having a flank that works both doing the backlines and also being a general damage dealer on top of that. I think what's important is that there's so much downtime in SKYE trying to get into the backlines that it just generally reduces your effectiveness in the game and how much you can actually achieve during that game. Anyway, like I've said, SKYE definitely scales up with the game, and she can be really effective in casual matches and sort of pub stomping, and you can see it in my footage that I'm doing very well with her, and people aren't aware or taking the right precautions or expecting me to come from some of the routes I take in this game, but I still don't think SKYE is quite in the right place at the moment in the game. And maybe it's raising her skill ceiling by changing her weapon from being this sort of random shooter that's easy to use to something that's a bit harder to use but might have some potential to do more damage or have less drop off and have more poke. Having that movement ability to always get into the backlines and not have to take massive trips to do so, and to also come around ways that are unexpected, and to maybe tweak the rest of the kit to come into balance with that. So in short, I think that they should make SKYE harder to play at lower levels and maybe give some more skill to her and sort of raise that skill ceiling, whilst also trying to give her more in the higher levels and give her some more movement so that she could be in the backlines more often, but at the same time have that difficulty level added to her. Now, what does everybody else think about SKYE in the game currently? Do you have trouble playing against her, or do you have a lot of fun playing with her? Do you agree with what my thoughts are, or do you have your own ideas of how you would change SKYE? Be sure to let me know in the comments section below. Hit that like button if you enjoyed the video, and thank you all very much for watching. I'll see you next time. Joshino.